Okay, so obvious place to start would be have you always wanted to work in the IT industry, or is it something some people fall into by accident, other people, sort of even when they're in primary school were thinking, yes, that's where I want to be. So just what took you into the IT industry, I guess?
Yeah, it's definitely not when I was young. It's like when I grow up, I want to be in the IT industry. It's definitely accidental. I think my professional journey has taken quite an unconventional path. I started off doing physics, being a physicist, and then did a startup, and then did law very unexpectedly, and then went back to physics. And during that time, when I was doing my PhD, I got exposed to AI. It was very interesting to me. In fact, I think it was more about AI safety, and this was about almost 17 years ago. And at that time, I realized AI is the transformative technology of our time. And so that sowed the seed of the kind of career direction. And by 2013, about 10 years ago, then when my co-founders came to me about the idea of faculty, then I took basically seized the opportunity and started a company.
Okay, so in terms of that career, so it sounds as if you, perhaps unusually for an IT, someone working in IT, you sounds as if you've been in the same organization all the way through. But can you just talk us through, I suppose, from the start of that to where you are today in terms of the career within the faculty?
Yeah, so as a startup, very much we started a company as a training program to help STEM graduates to go into industry being commercial data scientists. Because that was when the time when we were looking to leave academia and didn't know what would be a good route to do that transition. And so that's how we started a company. And then because part of the program we had to really go out and speak to companies and organizations about their data and doing data science. So we very quickly, the company evolved providing service, because you can imagine a lot of the projects would not be suitable for training, but rather it would require proper provision as a service. And so faculty, then we had our service aspects. So we grew our service aspect of the business, and almost, well, 10 years ago, like very beginning, even after we started the service aspect, we realized there weren't any tools to help enterprise to do AI. And so we started building our tools and selling that. And that's our first product. And so the company, we also started building our own product. And so as a business now, we then pretty much have these three aspects, which is service to bespoke services. We have our product, and we have our training to help enterprise to get on, I guess, the journey of AI.
And your current, I mean, your job title, what are you responsible for at the present time?
Yeah, at the present time, well, we've been now for 10 years, and like a lot of founders, my role is now what they would call like evangelizing. So the main thing is we see a lot of organizations right now very excited about AI. This is the number one conversations of most senior leaders, and people are rushing to looking for kind of implementing tools. But I think what we worry is that there might be a risk that there's maybe prioritizing short-term gain and over maybe more strategic and long-term transformative investment. So my role would be speaking to business leaders to really help guide that journey. And that's one aspect of my role. And then the other is really speaking out there, with a lot of great talented people, seeing how, because that's how we started as an organization, having really amazing quality, talented people. And that's also an aspect I do quite a lot.
I think we're going to explore the AI bit a little bit later in the conversation, but before we do, in terms of obviously being a woman in an IT role, you're perhaps in the minority, shall we say? But clearly, as you set up the own company, the company yourselves, you have the opportunity to at least control the environment. So I'm just wondering, I mean, hopefully this question makes sense anyway, but in terms of any bias you might have encouraged, maybe not within the company, because if you're in control of it, hopefully you were able to, but clearly when you went outside and, there's a woman knocking on the door and wanting to talk to someone about IT, what sort of experiences have you found, any challenges along the way, being a woman, as I say, in a fairly male dominated sector?
Mm. Um, that's a really great question. I think so even started off from physics, which is very well male dominated. One thing I have learned, much of maybe limitation, is perhaps more the way maybe I see the world, or how I put on a filter. To give you an example, was that like in my early days of my career, I feel like if I attribute challenges that I come across as being a woman, then I feel less empowered to actually overcome it. And so one thing I actually found, especially as a founder, is that working with, like, having a very supportive peer group, both male and female, that has really opened up to me that, gosh, actually we all share very similar challenges. And where, how could we share our experience or even coach each other to help us overcome the challenges? So then pretty much, then I find useful is like whenever I come across challenges, I like make sure I'm careful not think about this is a woman, but rather like how is it, like what are the skills and who could I talk to overcome that challenge? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And in terms, I was going to ask about mentoring as well, but it sounds to a certain extent what you've explained, you sort of within the company, you mentor one another. But have you had any other, I don't know, external mentors or just folks that you've been able to turn to when you have maybe had these challenges just to guide you through some of the difficult times?
100%. I think mentors, um, allies, advisors, I think all these people are just extremely invaluable to, I think, for anyone's career journey, because there might be something very practical about the business that people provide really useful advice and perspective. There are aspects of maybe even like emotional aspect where, like friends, family, peers could be really, really supportive, because I think that is also important, like well-being, especially as founders, dealing with challenges. And I would say, like, as I mentioned, this peer group that I've been part of was been incredibly valuable, because we're committed to being seeing, for example, having our gathering once a month, and they know, and I've been with the group for almost like 7 years, and so they've gone through that journey, they understand you, and when you talk about those challenges, people listen, and they're supportive, and they even ask you question to how could you overcome certain things, like a coaching aspect. I think those I to me is those combination. I call it my support network, or my village, you could say. That's incredibly valuable.
And in terms of the time you've been in the sector, have you noticed attitudes to equality and diversity even, I guess, change over that time? And also, I suppose, as the second part to that, do you think, depending on what, I suppose, what you answer there, but do you think there's still a way to go to get to a truly sort of equal workplace? And I guess I say whether that's within your organization or again what you encounter when you know interact with other organizations.
Yeah. Um, I think we could say as in tech industry that we're not quite there yet. There's been much improvement over the years. But if you look at some of the stacks, it's still like something like what 26% of people working in IT are women. So it's like generally the statistics which shows that we still much work to be done. Um, I think key thing is how we think about like I think one of the challenges having role models and like how do we ensure and provide an environment because it's going to take time for the younger generation or even mid-career people to have more people progress to more senior roles and where they are in the position to perhaps advocate best practices or mentor more junior, earlier career uh, women, for example. So I think, yes, I think we're making the right direction, but still much work to be done.
And in terms of your own position, do you feel a certain responsibility as obviously a successful entrepreneur in the sector to put yourself out there as a role model and therefore to help that process that you've just discussed? Or do you feel it's, I don't know, for other folks, maybe, you know, a higher profile, so just what responsibility you may or may not feel to help develop that equality?
Hmm. I think there are maybe two aspects for me personally that I feel like I can contribute. One is as a uh, potentially role model. It's how could I be more visible and to share my experience and even my mistakes. Most of the time it's my mistakes and how do I overcome challenges that perhaps is useful for people that how they could maybe get inspiration on on their journey. That's one aspect. The second is how could I be more actively to champion women and help. So one example is I do quite a lot of chairing activities for conferences. So then and to get more women speaker, it's actually quite hard work because turns out women tend to market themselves less. So then my approach is how could I get more women speakers to be out there. So then I put more effort to look for great women speakers, so to get help them to get that visibility as well. So I think so those are some ways I feel like, you know, how I could as a role model to make myself more visible and how I could help other women to be more visible. And lastly is how can I put forward my time to help mentor the younger generations to help give them advice or even just to help introduce them, connect them to the right people.
And in terms of the lessons you've learned through your career in terms of the equality landscape, and also maybe any thoughts you have as to ways, you know, not just the advice to individuals, but the ways that maybe companies can improve their, you know, attitude or just improve the equality you know, balance within organizations. Just any as I say, any lessons, experience, thoughts as to how people can you know, improve things.
Yeah, I think generally there one very positive thing I find nowadays is there's generally very good awareness of the kind of diversity and equality. I think one very important is how the leadership is view on attitude towards it, because leadership has to care deeply about diversity. It has to come from the top, because to make it happen, it has to be part of an organization's culture, business processes, learning and development, the lived experience of people in the organization. So that the leaders have to sort of care deeply about it. Second is, I find, instead of like forcing particular I don't know, like big initiative, I think there are opportunities to like people examining their values, because I think it's like actually leveraging their values. So for example, one of our value is seeking truth. And to seek truth, we need we need a very inclusive culture, where the best ideas can win. And so we need to make sure that any forum where ideas are debated, there is an environment in which every single person around the table, without exception, feels fully empowered to contribute. And so the best idea wins, no matter where it comes from. And to nurture that culture, it very much come from our value of like seeking truth and leveraging that value and using that to build towards a very inclusive culture. And I think that could be useful way for organizations, because what is their value, and using those value to leverage them to build a culture that's conducive to diversity and inclusivity.
Okay, and maybe just before we finish, we go back to the AI stuff. I mean, I'm fascinated because you say you worked out, was it 2013, how big AI, how important it was, and the rest of the world is kind of just about caught up. So I'm just interested, as someone who's obviously followed it for a while, with this sort of explosion. Obviously, generative AI is dominated the headlines, should we say, for the last 12, 18 months, but that's apparently only a drop in the ocean compared to these huge, large language models, etc., that are around the corner. So I guess, are you able to cut through the hype? What do you think AI will do? How big will it be, I suppose, in terms of the contribution to both the IT industry and the wider world? I know that's probably we could have a conversation for several hours, but if you're able to sort of summarize just what you think, AI's potential and any downsides as well, I suppose.
Yeah, so you're right. We've been around for 10 years, but it's really amazing how generative AI has played a role in the past, year or two to make it mainstream, making AI mainstream. I think, again, so what I was saying earlier is that we see organizations are rushing to implementing AI tools, which is exciting because it's got a lot of potential, but there's a risk of getting caught up in the hype cycle. So, it's about thinking, how to like invest strategically in the technology. Our belief is that you can really harness the benefit of AI whilst mitigating risk. And the way we think the approach is how you need to have safe, connected, and human first AI. And in that, with that approach, then you really can, in our experience, is that 10-year experience to harness the benefits whilst minimizing the downsides.
And in terms of I mean, I get a lot of info come through talking about AI ethics or ethical AI, and I kind of chuckle because I tend to assume, once a bit of technology is out there, no matter what people say, and obviously governments, whether it's the UK one or whatever, they're all trying to frantically regulate this stuff. But fundamentally, is it possible, do you think, to in any meaningful way control the way AI is used, or do we just have to accept that should we call them the large IT people that tend to kind of trample over whatever, just because they can, and no one's really able to stop them. Yeah, in general terms, do you think they've got an unstoppable momentum? So at the moment, they're I know that people are complaining that they're potentially using copyrighted material, to train their models, etc., and nobody's able to lay a finger. Just your thoughts, I suppose, as to how regulated AI can be, or will it just be a bit of a wild west, and we just have to accept that anything goes?
Yeah, I think there are two aspects. One is the organization's individual. There's the role of government. Um, as I say, like what got me into AI is very much AI safety, and from our experience, that it's about making smart choices and choosing safe, connected, and human-led AI. I'll just expand a little bit what I mean by that. I think that's important. Safe AI means that it's explainable and that human knows that it will, what it will do. And connected means that you do not have, uh, or rather, connected AI means you have systems or models that are connected together and not working in silos. So humans have full oversight of system. So I think your listeners and viewers weren't familiar with the shadow IT. So what you don't want is to have shadow AI. That's why you want to have that oversight and governance. And human first AI is where it's designed by human for human decision making and human in constant, I guess, control of it. So to ensure that, hence, you really sort of minimize the risk of the problem you describe and really whilst harnessing the benefit. So that's how organizations and individuals approach in using AI. There's the government aspect where, the regulatory, and I think organizations are asking, industry are saying, actually, it'd be great to have regulations. And I I am very optimistic about especially UK's role in regulation, because UK has a track record being actually quite expertly like able to regulate industry. So for example, like the finance industry, the fact that UK has a really vibrant finance sector is because its ability to regulate in a very productive and thoughtful way. And seeing government's approach as recent as 2 weeks ago, I think they published the AI regulatory sort of responses, consultation responses, the approach, of being pragmatic, context-based, leveraging current regulatory authorities. I think those are really very positive aspects. So I think I feel optimistic if we do those aspects well, doing this, making the right choice of safe, connected, and human first AI plus good government regulation. I think this is a field and industry that could really sort of accelerate and we could benefit from it.
And do you think also as well, a bit like the sort of, I mean, cybersecurity is an ongoing issue, but the more people are educated as to the the possible downsides or the way bad actors will use it, do you think it's similar with AI? So with these say deep fakes appearing or whatever it is, videos appearing, people sort of believing what they're seeing as opposed to questioning. Do you think there's an important role to educate people to understand, what how people can manipulate information, voices, etc., and therefore to be a little bit skeptical when something they view or hear and they think, well, just to question the validity, or is it not that easy?
Yeah, I think it is it's definitely possible, and I think it's again I feel optimistic about it because with the amount of attention I think the society has on AI, people are very engaged. People talk a lot about AI, and the public discourse, they want to be more educated. They are asking questions, and the discussion you could see are being more nuanced as well. So previously, people there might be more like polarized views that, it's either all good or all bad, AI. But now you could see the conversation really sort of progressing, like people trying to understand more what are the like real world examples, what other use cases, what other contexts. And as you say, like even deepfake, people are more aware of it. I think that public awareness is extremely helpful, and I think it will only continue instead of disappear. So I'm optimistic about it.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask. Obviously, you said that, so you don't, because I know the sort of the doomsday scenarios are that AI is going to end up destroying us all. I think that's a little bit sort of science fiction as opposed to fact. That's just a little bit, let's see. Whereas, as I say, I always use cybersecurity as the comparison that,
Yes.
clearly the IT world, there's massive benefits, and yes, there is a downside, but clearly the benefits are substantially better. And you think AI is a similar scenario. So yes, it can be used for bad things, but the positives that it brings to the world far outweigh that. So therefore, we just have to, not accept that, but at least understand that and do our best to ensure that that balance remains. Is that fair?
Yeah, and with that knowledge, we're able to make inform like good choices how we use the technology.
Okay. I've covered a lot of ground there. You give me a lot of your time, so I'm really grateful. Thanks for that. Some lovely answers. Very interesting. So Andy, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.